The massive council chamber hummed with the voices of dozens of alien species. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their special seats, each designed for their different body types. The air recycling system worked hard to keep everyone breathing comfortably. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat quietly in the human section, her hands folded on the smooth metal table in front of her. She looked small compared to the other representatives. The reptilian hegemony delegates were twice her height, with thick scales and powerful claws. The Crustacean Federation admirals wore heavy armor that made them look like walking tanks. Even the peaceful flower people from the garden worlds stood taller than most humans. "The situation grows worse each day," Chairman Vexthai announced. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation system. The tall reptilian leader's yellow eyes swept across the gathered representatives. "The Void Swarm has attacked 7 more outer colonies this month. Our combined fleets are struggling to keep them back." Admiral Korth of the Crustacean Federation clicked his claws together loudly. The sound was like hammers hitting metal. "We need more ships, more weapons. More soldiers willing to fight and die." His 4 eyes focused on different sections of the chamber. "Some species are not doing their part." Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Chin noticed how many of them glanced toward the human section. She kept her expression calm and friendly, the same look she had worn for 3 years since. Humanity joined the council. "The humans have provided excellent medical support," said Bloom of Morning, speaking for the flower people. Her voice was like wind through leaves. "Their doctors have saved many lives." "Medical support does not win wars," Admiral Korth snapped. "We need fighters. We need ships that can take damage and deal it back. We need species that understand what real war means." Chun felt the familiar weight of their expectations. For 3 years, the council had seen humanity as the friendly new neighbors. Humans ran hospitals. They traded useful goods. They helped solve arguments between other species. But when it came to fighting, everyone assumed humans were too soft. Chairman Vexthai turned his attention to Chun. "Ambassador Chun, the Council has discussed humanity's role in our defense efforts. We appreciate your medical aid and supply lines. However, we believe Earth could contribute more to our military needs." Chun stood up slowly. Around her, representatives from species that could bench press a car waited to hear what the small human would say. She smiled politely. "Chairman Vexthai, the Council's friendship means everything to humanity. We want to help our allies in every way we can." "Excellent," Vexthai said. His reptilian features showed satisfaction. "Then you will increase your military contributions? Perhaps provide more armed vessels?" "I'm afraid that's not possible, Ad." "This time," Chun replied, her voice stayed calm and pleasant. "Humanity prefers peaceful solutions to conflicts. We believe there are always better ways to solve problems than through violence." A low rumble of conversation spread through the chamber. Chun caught fragments through the translation system. Words like naive and weak and typical mammals. She kept smiling. Admiral Korth's claws scraped against his armor. "Peaceful solutions? The Void Swarm does not negotiate, human. They consume everything in their path. Your peaceful solutions will not stop them from eating your colonies." "We understand the threat is serious," Chun said. "That's why we're happy to continue supporting the war effort through medical aid, supply runs, and refugee assistance. These roles are just as important as combat operations." The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives from warrior species shook their heads. Others made sounds that the translation system couldn't process. Chairman Vexthai raised one clawed hand for silence. "Ambassador Chun," he said, and his voice carried disappointment. "Your species has been part of this council for 3 years. In that time, you have seen what the Void Swarm can do. How can you still believe that kindness and medical supplies will stop them?" Chun's smile never wavered. "Because we believe every life has value, Chairman, including yours." Elder Korth, the ancient representative from the archives, leaned forward in his floating chair. His species was old beyond measure, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Child of Earth, your words are noble, but nobility does not always survive contact with reality. Sometimes, the only way to protect what you love is to destroy what threatens it. We appreciate the Elder's wisdom, Chun replied with a small bow. However, humanity must follow its own path. We will continue to provide support in ways that align with our values. The session continued for another hour. Representatives shared reports about void swarm movements. They discussed resource allocation and fleet movements. Through it all, Joan took careful notes and asked thoughtful questions about logistics and medical needs. When the session ended, groups of representatives gathered to discuss the human problem. Qian heard fragments of their conversations as she packed her things, soft-hearted mammals. Too civilized for their own good. They'll learn when the swarm reaches their worlds. Useful for support roles at least. Chun finished packing and walked toward the exit. As she passed a group of crustacean officers, Admiral Korth spoke loud enough for her to hear. "It's almost sad," he said to his subordinates. "They think the galaxy runs on good intentions and politeness. When the real fighting starts, they'll hide behind species with actual courage." Chun paused for just a moment. Something flickered across her face, too quick for the aliens to notice. Then she continued, walking, her steps making soft sounds on the metal floor. The human quarters were located in the diplomatic section of the station. The halls were quieter here, designed for a species that preferred less noise and chaos. Chun's office was small but comfortable. With a view of the stars outside, she sat at her desk and activated the secure communication system. The screen lit up with the symbol of Earth Command. After a few seconds, the face of Director Hassan appeared. "Ambassador," Hassan said. "How did the council session go?" "As expected," Chun replied. "They want us to increase military contributions." I declined, citing our preference for peaceful solutions. Hassan nodded. "Good, and their reaction?" "They think we're naive pacifists who are too civilized to understand real warfare." Chun's polite smile was gone now. In its place was something much colder. Admiral Korth made several comments about mammals being too soft for serious fighting. "Maintain Protocol 7, Hassan said. "Defensive posture only, medical aid supply runs, refugee support. Let them continue thinking we're harmless." "Director," Shin said, "how long do we maintain this facade?" "Some of their species are genuinely struggling against the void swarm. The flower people lost an entire colony last week. Their children ... Double quote. Hassan's expression softened slightly. "I know, Sarah, but they're not ready to know what humanity really is, not yet. If they understood what we're capable of, everything would change. Some would fear us. Others would try to use us. The balance we've built would collapse." Chun nodded, though her expression showed the weight of the decision. "What if the void swarm breaks through their lines? What if they reach Earth?" "Then we stop being polite," Hassan said simply. "But until that moment comes, we stay in character. The galaxy isn't ready for humanity to take off the gloves." The communication ended, leaving Chin alone with the stars. She opened her personal files and began updating her reports. Her notes detailed every species' military capabilities, their tactical preferences, their technological strengths and weaknesses, information that humanity had been gathering for 3 years while playing the role of helpful neighbors. On her secondary screen, she monitored communications from across the galaxy, supply convoys moving through space lanes, medical ships responding to emergencies, refugee vessels carrying survivors from attacked colonies. All of them flew human flags and carried human crews. What the Council didn't know was that every medical ship carried enough firepower to level a city. Every supply convoy was protected by vessels that could outfight anything in the known galaxy. Every refugee rescue operation was also a reconnaissance mission, gathering intelligence on void swarm tactics and technology. Chun finished her reports and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring another council session, more discussions about military needs, more polite refusals from the harmless human representative. Outside her window, the stars looked peaceful. But Qian knew that in the darkness between them, ancient things stirred. Things that ate civilizations and left nothing but empty space behind. things that were moving closer to Council space with each passing day. She also knew that when those things finally met humanity in open battle, the galaxy would learn something new about the species that preferred peaceful solutions. They would learn why humans had been so insistent on solving problems with words instead of weapons. It wasn't because humans were weak. It was because they remembered what happened when they stopped being polite. Chun turned off the lights and settled into bed. Her last thought before sleep was a prayer that the Council would never have to see humanity with the gloves off. For everyone's sake. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. The polite request moved through space at a steady pace, its engines humming quietly. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a simple human merchant vessel carrying supplies between systems. The ship's registry listed it as a cargo hauler. Its transponder broadcast peaceful intentions. Its crew wore the simple uniforms of civilian traders. But appearances could be deceiving. "Captain," said Lieutenant Park from the communications station, "we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Kepler outer rim. Looks like the Void Swarm hit 3 colonies simultaneously." Rodriguez frowned as he read the reports flowing across his screen. The attacks had been coordinated and brutal. The Council's defense fleets had responded quickly, but they were too late. Thousands were dead or missing. "Any Council ships in the area requesting assistance?" Rodriguez asked. "Several, sir. Most are asking for medical support or evacuation help. But there's one emergency beacon that's different." Park's fingers moved across her console. "It's from an insectoid scout ship. The signal is weak and breaking." The insectoids were good people, Rodriguez thought. Their species looked like giant praying mantises, but they were peaceful explorers who helped map safe routes through dangerous space. If one of their scouts was in trouble, it deserved help. "Set course for the scout ship," Rodriguez ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir," said Chief Engineer Santos from his station, "if we go to maximum speed, we'll reach the area in 6 hours. But our engine signature will look unusual for a merchant vessel." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Then we better hope nobody is watching too closely." The polite request surged forward, its true engines awakening. The ship that had been moving like a lazy cargo hauler suddenly accelerated like a military interceptor. Space flowed past the windows as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. 6 hours later, they dropped back into normal space near the insectoid beacon. Rodriguez's crew immediately went to work, their movements sharp and professional. These were not the relaxed motions of merchant sailors. These were the precise actions of a military unit. "Sensors show wreckage ahead," reported Ensign Kim. "One insectoid scout ship, heavily damaged. I'm also detecting 3 Void Swarm hunter-killers moving in from the port side." Rodriguez felt his expression harden. The Void Swarm ships were ugly. Things, all sharp angles and dark metal. They looked like they had been built specifically to cause fear. Each one was roughly the size of a Council frigate, but faster and more heavily armed. "The scout ship still has life signs," Kim continued. "Faint, but present. 1 survivor, maybe 2. "The hunter-killers will reach the wreck in 12 minutes, added Park. "They're not bothering to hide their approach." Rodriguez made his decision. "Quickly, battle stations, prepare for combat operations." "Santos, I need our real weapon systems online." "Aye, Captain," Santos replied. His fingers danced across his console, and the ship around them seemed to wake up. Hidden panels slid open to reveal weapon batteries. The cargo bays reconfigured themselves into missile tubes. The merchant vessel polite request became something else entirely. "Remember," Rodriguez announced to his crew, "we're still supposed to be a simple trading ship, so let's make this look easy." The 3 Void Swarm ships moved in perfect formation, closing on the damaged insectoid vessel. They seemed confident, probably expecting no resistance from whatever rescue ships might arrive. The Council's response times were well known, and no serious military assets should be in the area yet. They did not expect to meet the polite request. Rodriguez's ship swept in from above, coming in at an angle that put it between the hunter-killers and their target. The Void Swarm ships immediately changed course to engage this new threat. "They're targeting us," Kim reported. "Energy weapons charging, they're not even trying to communicate." "Typical," Rodriguez muttered. "Santos, show them what happens when they threaten our friends." The first Void Swarm ship fired, sending a stream of purple energy toward the polite request. The beam should have cut through the merchant vessel's shields and hull like paper. Instead, it struck military-grade defensive screens and scattered harmlessly into space. Rodriguez's return fire was immediate and precise. Twin particle beams lanced out from hidden weapons pods, striking the attacker's engine section. The Void Swarm ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The second hunter-killer tried to flank them, moving fast and firing constantly. Rodriguez's crew responded with calm efficiency. Point defense lasers swatted aside incoming missiles. Counter-battery fire destroyed the enemy's weapon systems. A final spread of plasma torpedoes finished the job. The third Void Swarm ship tried to run. It lasted exactly 47 seconds. "All targets destroyed," Kim reported. "The area is clear." "Time from first contact to mission completion?" Rodriguez asked. 3 minutes, 18 seconds, Park replied. Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. "Good work, everyone. Now let's see about our insectoid friend." The rescue operation took longer than the combat. The scout ship was badly damaged, its hull breached in several places. Rodriguez's team worked carefully to extract the survivor without causing further injury. The insectoid they pulled from the wreckage was named Zixlac. He was unconscious when they found him, but the ship's medical bay brought him back to health. Quickly, when he finally woke up, his large compound eyes focused on Rodriguez with confusion. "Where am I?" Zixlac asked. His voice came through the translation system as a series of clicks and whistles. "You're safe," Rodriguez said gently. "You're aboard the human vessel Polite Request. We responded to your distress beacon." Zixlac's head tilted in the way insectoids showed surprise. "Human? But humans are not warriors. You run medical ships and cargo vessels?" "We do indeed," Rodriguez replied with a straight face. "This is a cargo vessel. We were delivering medical supplies to the outer colonies when we heard your beacon." "But the Void Swarm ships," Zixlac said, his confusion growing. "There were 3 hunter-killers. How did a cargo ship?" "We got lucky," Rodriguez said calmly. "Right place at the right time. The hunter-killers must have had some kind of malfunction. They exploded just as we arrived." Zixlac stared at him. Even with the translation system, Rodriguez could tell. The insectoid didn't believe a word of it. But Zixlac was also smart enough to recognize that the humans had saved his life, and smart enough not to ask too many uncomfortable questions. As they traveled toward the nearest council station, Zixlac had time to observe the human crew. What he saw didn't match what everyone knew about humans. The crew moved with military precision. Their cargo bay contained medical supplies, but also equipment that looked suspiciously like weapon components. The ship's navigation sensors were far too sophisticated for a simple merchant vessel. Most telling of all, Rodriguez's crew treated him with the easy confidence of professional soldiers. They were polite and helpful, but underneath the friendly surface was something harder. These were people who had seen combat and won. "Captain Rodriguez," Zixlac said during their second day of travel, "may I ask you something?" "Of course," Rodriguez replied. They were sitting in the ship's small mess hall, sharing a meal. "How long have you been running cargo between the outer colonies?" Rodriguez smiled. "Oh, about 3 years now. Ever since humanity joined the council. We like to help our neighbors." "And in that time, how many Void Swarm encounters have you had?" "This was our first," Rodriguez said easily. "Quite exciting, really. We're just grateful everyone made it out safely." Zixlac nodded slowly, but his compound eyes were studying Rodriguez's face, looking for tells. "Your crew handles emergencies very well for civilian traders. We train for emergencies," Rodriguez replied. "Space can be dangerous. It pays to be prepared." That evening, Zixlac made his own preparations. Using his personal communicator, he sent a carefully worded message to his superiors in the Insectoid Navigation Guild. The message contained his official report about the rescue, but it also included some personal observations. The humans, he wrote, were not what they seemed. Meanwhile, in the ship's secure communications room, Rodriguez was having his own conversation with Earth Command. "Mission successful," he reported to Director Hassan. 1 insectoid rescued, 3 void swarm. Units eliminated, no damage to our ship or crew. "Any complications?" Hassan asked. The survivor is observant. He knows something doesn't add up about our cover story. Hassan frowned. How much does he suspect? Hard to say. He's not asking direct questions, but he's clearly thinking. Insectoids are natural navigators. They notice details that other species miss. "Can you maintain the deception until you reach the council station?" Rodriguez considered the question. "Probably. But Director, this won't be the last time. The Void Swarm is getting more aggressive. Our patrol ships are making contact more frequently. Sooner or later, someone is going to see something they can't explain away." Hassan was quiet for a long moment. "Maintain Protocol 7 for now, but start preparing the crew for the possibility that our cover might not hold much longer." "Understood, sir." The conversation ended, leaving Rodriguez alone with his thoughts. Through the bulkhead, he could hear his crew going about their duties. They were good people, professional soldiers, who had signed up to protect humanity and its allies. But they were also tired of pretending to be something they weren't. For 3 years, ships like the Polite Request had patrolled the galaxy's shipping lanes. They carried legitimate cargo and provided real medical aid, but they also watched and waited. They gathered intelligence on potential threats and maintained a hidden defensive network that spanned dozens of star systems. The Council saw human merchant vessels and hospital ships. What they didn't see were the warships disguised as cargo haulers, the surveillance platforms hidden inside medical stations, or the rapid response teams ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Rodriguez's crew had signed up to protect people, but protection required strength, and strength required the ability to use violence when peaceful solutions failed. The galaxy wasn't ready to see that side of humanity yet, but as the Void Swarm grew bolder and the attacks increased, Rodriguez wondered how much longer they could maintain the pretense. How many more lucky encounters and convenient malfunctions could they explain away before someone started asking the right questions? 2 days later, they reached the council station. Zixlac thanked Rodriguez and his crew for their help, but his compound eyes lingered on the ship as he walked away. He was definitely thinking about what he had seen. Rodriguez watched him go, then gave the order to depart. The Polite Request resumed its journey, once again broadcasting as a simple merchant vessel carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. But in the ship's secure files, Rodriguez added another report to humanity's growing intelligence database. The Void Swarm was adapting its tactics. Their ships were better coordinated than before, and they were moving deeper into council space with each attack. Soon, Rodriguez thought, the time for polite pretenses would end. Soon the galaxy would see what humanity really looked like when the gloves came off. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. Alarm sirens echoed through the station corridors while emergency lights bathed everything in red. Representatives rushed to their seats, many still wearing sleeping clothes or environmental suits. Chairman Vexthai's scales had turned a darker shade of green, a sign of extreme stress in his species. His clawed hands shook as he activated the main display screen. The holographic image showed the Council's capital system, Harmony Prime, surrounded by a massive fleet of Void Swarm ships. "The attack began 6 hours ago," Vexthai announced. His voice carried poorly disguised panic. "They came out of dark space in numbers we have never seen before. Thousands of ships organized into perfect formations." Ambassador Chun sat in her usual place, watching the tactical display with careful attention. The human section seemed strangely calm compared to the chaos around them. While other species representatives shouted questions and demands, Chun simply took notes. Admiral Korth's armor bore fresh damage from the battle. His ship had barely escaped the initial assault. "We lost 60% of our combined fleet in the first hour," he reported. Their ships are faster than our intelligence suggested. Their weapons cut through our shields like they were not there. Elder Korath's ancient face showed deep concern. In all my centuries, I have never seen such coordination from the void. Swarm, they are not acting like simple predators anymore. This is military strategy. The display updated to show the current situation. Red markers indicated void swarm positions surrounding the capital world. Blue markers showed the remaining council forces, scattered and desperate. The math was simple and terrible. How long until they reach the planet? Asked Blue Morning. The flower person's voice trembled like leaves in a storm. At their current rate of advance, 18 hours, Admiral Korth replied. Maybe 20 if we can slow them down. But we don't have enough ships left to mount a real defense. Chairman. Vexthai turned toward the human section. His yellow eyes focused on Ambassador Chun with desperate hope. Ambassador Chun, we must ask humanity for any assistance you can provide. Any ships, any weapons, any support at all. Chun stood slowly, her movements calm despite the chaos around her. Every eye in the chamber focused on the small human woman. Chairman Vexthai, you have our deepest sympathy for this terrible situation. Of course, humanity will help our friends in their time of need. Relief washed across many faces. Finally, the humans would contribute something meaningful to the defense effort. However, Chun continued, I should mention that we will need to adjust our operational parameters for this situation. Admiral Korth's claws clicked impatiently. What do you mean, operational parameters? We need ships and weapons, not bureaucratic language. Chun's smile remained perfectly polite. I mean that our usual peaceful approach may not be sufficient. For dealing with the void swarm, we may need to take a more direct stance. Any help is welcome, Vexthai said quickly. What can humanity provide? I will need to contact Earth Command for authorization, Chun replied. Please give me 1 hour to arrange our response. A council session went into recess while Chun made her calls. Representatives gathered in small groups, whispering about what the humans might contribute. Most hoped for additional medical ships or supply vessels. A few optimists thought Earth might send some lightly armed escort ships. None of them expected what actually happened. Chun's conversation with Earth Command was brief and decisive. Director Hassan, the Void Swarm has launched a major assault on the Council Capital System. Chairman Vexthai has formally requested our assistance. Hassan's face on the screen looked grim but unsurprised. Estimated enemy strength? Thousands. Of ships, they destroyed most of the Council fleet in the opening engagement. Admiral Korth estimates 18 hours before they reach the planet. And the Council's remaining defensive capabilities? Minimal. They're desperate, Director. This is a complete defeat unless something changes. Hassan was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, you understand what this means? If we intervene at full capacity, there's no going back to Protocol 7. The secret will be out. Chun nodded. I understand, sir. But if we don't act, millions of innocent people will die, including species that have been nothing but kind to. U.S. authorized, Hassan said simply. Full deployment. All available assets. Tell General Wong she has permission to remove the hostile entities. Sir, Chun said carefully, what should I tell the Council about our capabilities? Hassan's expression was unreadable. Tell them the truth, that humanity takes the protection of our friends very seriously. When the Council session resumed, Chun delivered her response. The Earth government has authorized full military support for the defense of Harmony Prime, she announced. Our forces will arrive within 6 hours. Admiral Korth looked confused. Your forces? Ambassador, with respect, humanity's merchant marine cannot possibly make a difference against a fleet of this size. Chun's polite smile flickered for just a moment. Admiral Korth, I think you may be operating under some incorrect assumptions about humanity's capabilities. Before anyone could ask what she meant, the Chamber's communication system activated. A new voice, crisp and professional, filled the room. Harmony Prime Control. This is General Patricia Wong of the Earth Defense Force First Fleet. We are dropping out of hyperspace and requesting immediate tactical updates. The main display screen switched to external sensors. What appeared in space above Harmony Prime made every representative in the chamber fall silent. Ships materialized out of hyperspace in perfect formation. But these were not the small medical vessels and cargo haulers the Council had seen before. These were warships, massive and menacing, bristling with weapons that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. The lead ship alone was 3 times the size of Admiral Korth's flagship. Its hull was dark gray metal covered in sensor arrays and weapon batteries. Along its sides, launch bays opened to reveal fighters and bombers in numbers that made the Admiral's head spin. "Impossible," whispered Elder Korth. "Those ships, where did they come from?" "They've been there all along," Chun replied quietly. Waiting, more ships appeared. Destroyers and cruisers and massive dreadnoughts that looked like they could crack planets. The human fleet spread out across the system in formations that spoke of long practice and professional competence. General Wong's voice came through the communication system again. "Harmony Prime Control, this is General Wong. We have visual contact with hostile forces. Requesting permission to engage." Chairman Vextai found his voice. "General Wong, this is Chairman Vextai of the Galactic Council. You have full permission to engage the enemy. Please help us." "Copy that, Chairman." "Consider it." Done. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The human fleet moved with precision that made Admiral Korth's best formations look clumsy. Their ships accelerated and maneuvered as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Their weapons reached across impossible distances to strike targets with perfect accuracy. The Void Swarm, which had seemed unstoppable hours before, suddenly found itself facing something it had never encountered. An enemy that was faster, stronger, better armed, and infinitely more skilled. Human fighters swept through Void Swarm formations like sharks through schools of fish. Their bombers delivered payloads that could destroy entire enemy squadrons. With single strikes, the capital ships methodically eliminated larger targets with weapons that turned matter into energy. "How are they doing this?" Admiral Korth asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Those ships, they're more advanced than anything we've seen." Elder Korth was studying the tactical display with growing amazement. "Look at their formations. Look at their coordination. This is not improvised. They have done this before." The truth was even more shocking than the old historian realized. The human fleet moved with such precision because they had been planning for this moment for 3 years. Every ship knew its role. Every captain understood the battle plan. Every weapon had been tested and calibrated for maximum efficiency. As the Council representatives watched in stunned silence, the massive Void Swarm fleet was systematically destroyed. Ships that had terrified the galaxy's greatest military minds were reduced to scrap metal and energy clouds. "Target designation Void 77 eliminated," came a calm report from one of the human ships. "Moving to engage Void 78, confirmed, Hunter Squadron. Good shooting." The casual professionalism in their voices was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. These humans were not struggling against a superior enemy. They were conducting routine operations with the same calm efficiency that other species used to file paperwork. Within 4 hours, it was over. The Void Swarm fleet that had represented the greatest threat in galactic history had been completely eliminated. Not a single enemy ship escaped. "Harmony Prime Control, this is General Wong. All hostile contacts have been neutralized. The system is secure." Chairman Vextai stared at the display screen showing empty space where thousands of enemy ships had been. "General Wong, on behalf of the Galactic Council, how do we even begin to thank you?" "No thanks necessary, Chairman. We protect our friends." Elder Korth's ancient voice cut through the celebration. "Ambassador Chun, I must ask the question that everyone is thinking. Where did these ships come from? How long has humanity possessed such military power?" Chun looked around the chamber at the faces staring at her. Some showed gratitude. Others showed confusion. A few showed the beginning of fear as they started to understand the implications. "Elder Korth, humanity has always possessed these capabilities. We simply chose not to use them. But why? Demanded Admiral Korth. Why hide such strength? Why pretend to be peaceful merchants and medical personnel? Chun's expression grew serious. Because we learned something important from our own history. Admiral, we learned what happens when the strong prey on the weak. We learned what happens when military might becomes the only solution to every problem. She gestured toward the display showing the aftermath of the battle. We chose to be your friends instead of your conquerors. We chose to help you solve problems with words instead of weapons. We chose to protect instead of dominate. But you could have conquered us, whispered Bloom of Morning. From the very beginning, you could have taken everything. Yes, Chun admitted. We could have. That's exactly why we didn't. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 3 years, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had been sitting at their table, pretending to be harmless neighbors. For 3 years, humanity had been strong enough to rule the galaxy and had chosen instead to serve coffee at diplomatic meetings. Chairman Vexthias' voice was very quiet when he spoke. Ambassador Chun, what happens now? Now that we know what humanity is truly capable of? Chun's smile returned, but it was different now, warmer, more genuine. Now, we continue being friends, Chairman. Nothing has changed except that you know we're capable of protecting the things we care about. And what if... Admiral Korth's voice trailed off, but everyone knew what he was asking. What if you make us angry? Chun finished. Admiral, I hope that never happens, for everyone's sake. Outside the station windows, the human fleet maintained its protective formation around Harmony Prime. The ships that had just saved the galaxy hung in space like sleeping giants, their weapons powered. Down but ready. Elder Korth spoke for them all. I think, Ambassador Chun, that the galaxy has learned something important today. What's that, Elder? That true strength is not about who you can defeat. It is about who you choose to protect. Chun nodded approvingly. Now you're beginning to understand why humanity prefers diplomatic solutions. As the emergency session ended and representatives began filing out, each carried with them a new understanding of their place in the galaxy. They had been saved by friends who could have been masters. They had been protected by guardians who could have been conquerors. And somewhere in the back of their minds, each of them made a mental note never to make the humans angry enough to stop being polite. 3 days after the battle, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. News reports flooded communication networks across hundreds of worlds. The void swarm, which had terrorized entire systems for decades, had been completely destroyed in a matter of hours. Elder Korth sat in his private chambers aboard the council station, surrounded by data files and historical records. His ancient mind worked slowly through the implications of what he had witnessed. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. He had spent 72 hours reviewing every interaction between humanity and the Council since first contact. What he discovered made his blood run cold. A soft chime announced a visitor. Enter, Korth called out. Ambassador Chun walked into the chamber, carrying a cup of what humans called tea. She moved with the same calm grace she had always shown, but now Korth saw it differently. This was not the careful steps of a nervous diplomat. This was the controlled movement of a predator choosing to be gentle. Elder Korth, Chun said. With a polite bow, I heard you wanted to speak with me. Please sit, Korth replied, gesturing to a chair designed for human proportions. I have been researching, Ambassador. Learning things I perhaps should have noticed years ago. Chun settled into the chair and sipped her tea. What kind of things? Korth activated a holographic display that filled the air between them. Let me show you what I have discovered about humanity's true activities in our galaxy. The first image showed shipping routes across council space. Thousands of trade lanes were marked in different colors, representing various species merchant vessels. But one color dominated the map completely. Human ships, Korth said quietly. They are everywhere. Every major trade route, every strategic system, every important colony. You have more vessels moving through our space than all other species combined. Chun nodded calmly. Humans are excellent traders. We enjoy commerce with our neighbors. Indeed, Korath replied, but I looked deeper. The display changed to show technical specifications. Every human merchant vessel carries the same basic sensor package. Military-grade sensors that can detect ships at twice the range of our best equipment. Safety is important when traveling through dangerous space, Chun said. The display changed. Again, your medical stations are equally interesting. They are positioned at exactly the locations needed to provide rapid response to any system in Council space. By coincidence, these are also the perfect positions for military bases. Chun took another sip of tea. We believe in being helpful. Korath leaned forward, his ancient eyes focusing on Chun's face. Your cultural exchange programs? For 3 years, you have sent humans to live and work on every major world in Council space. They learn our languages, study our customs, observe our military capabilities. Cultural understanding promotes peace, Chun replied. Your refugee. Assistance operations. Every time there is a conflict or disaster, human ships arrive within hours. They know exactly where to go, exactly what supplies are needed, exactly how many people require evacuation. The evidence continued to mount. Human communication relays that could monitor all transmissions across the galaxy. Human research stations that studied every known technology. Human diplomatic personnel who somehow always knew exactly what to say to prevent wars between other species. Elder Korath, Chun said gently, you seem troubled by humanity's helpfulness. I am troubled, Korath admitted, because I am beginning to understand what I am looking at. This is not commerce and cultural exchange. This is the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. Chun set down her teacup. Her polite smile remained, but something shifted in her eyes. Please continue. Korath activated. Another display. Your Captain Rodriguez saved the insectoid scout Zixlac 3 weeks ago, but I studied the sensor logs from that encounter. The human ship's acceleration profile was impossible for a merchant vessel. Its weapon signatures matched no known civilian technology. Captain Rodriguez is resourceful, Chun said. I checked the registry for his ship. The polite request was supposedly built at Luna Shipyards. But Luna Shipyards has never built a merchant vessel of that class. They build only military ships. Chun was quiet now, listening. So I investigated further, Korath continued. I cross-referenced every human vessel's construction records with their apparent capabilities. Ambassador Ching, according to your own data, humanity has built exactly 17 civilian spacecraft in the past 3 years. The old historian let that sink in. But we have logged encounters with over 4,000 human vessels in Council space during the same period. That is a significant discrepancy, Chun acknowledged. Korath stood up and began pacing, his aged body moving with nervous energy. Do you want to know the most terrifying discovery? I traced the origins of every major peace agreement in the past 3 years. Every trade dispute that was resolved peacefully. Every territorial argument that ended in compromise. Every potential war that somehow never started. He turned to face Chun directly. In every single case, a human was involved. A human diplomat who suggested the perfect solution. A human trader who provided just the right economic incentive. A human cultural exchange student who happened to know exactly the right people. Chun listened without interrupting. You did not just watch us, Korath said, his voice filled with awe and terror. You managed us. For 3 years, humanity has been preventing conflicts, steering negotiations, and shaping political outcomes across the entire galaxy. We prefer peaceful solutions, Chun replied calmly. But that is not the worst part, Korath continued. The worst part is what it means about your capabilities. To conduct intelligence operations on this scale, to coordinate activities across hundreds of star systems, to predict and prevent conflicts before they start, the level of organization and planning required is staggering. He sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his many centuries. Ambassador, your species has been playing a game so complex that the rest of us did not even know we were pieces on the board. Chun finished her tea and set the cup aside. Elder Korath, you are a very wise being. Tell me, what do you think this means? It means, Korath said slowly, that humanity could have conquered our entire civilization within weeks of first contact. Not through superior weapons, though you clearly have those. Through superior understanding of how we think, how we react, how we can be influenced. And yet we did not conquer you, Chun pointed out. No, Korath agreed. You became our friends. Instead, but why? Why choose the difficult path of manipulation and management when domination would have been so much easier? Chun stood up and walked to the window. Outside, human ships maintained their protective formation around the station. Tell me, Elder, what do you know about Earth's history? Very little, Korath admitted. Humans share almost no information about your homeworld's past. We are a species that has experienced war, Chun said quietly. Not the clean, honorable conflicts between star empires that your people remember. Real war, total war. Wars where entire populations were exterminated. Wars where survival meant becoming monsters. She turned to face him. We learned what happens when the strong prey on the weak. We learned what happens when one group decides that another group does not deserve to exist. We learned these lessons through rivers of blood and cities full of ashes. And this taught you restraint? Korath asked. It taught us responsibility. Chun corrected. When you have the power to destroy civilizations, you have a responsibility to protect them instead. When you have the ability to control others, you have a duty to guide them toward their own best interests. Korath was quiet for a long moment, but the deception. The lies about your capabilities, was that necessary? Chun's expression grew. Sad. What would have happened if we had arrived in your galaxy and announced that we were the most advanced military power you had ever encountered? How would your species have reacted? Korath thought about it. Fear, some species would have. Tried to ally with you for protection. Others would have seen you as a threat to be eliminated. And then, Chun prompted, arms races, preemptive strikes. Alliance systems designed to contain your power. Political instability as governments fell and new ones rose based on their stance toward humanity. Exactly, Chun said. The galaxy would have torn itself apart trying to deal with us. Millions would have died in wars that served no purpose except fear. So you pretended to be weak. We pretended to be harmless, Chun corrected again. There is a difference. A weak species can become strong through technology or alliances. A harmless species chooses not to harm others even when it could. Korath activated his display one more time. Ambassador, I have one final question. According to my research, humanity monitors every major star system, every political development, every technological advancement in council space. You know, our military capabilities better than we do. You understand our psychology, our fears, our weaknesses? Yes, Chun confirmed. If any species in the council ever became a threat to humanity, what would happen to them? Chun was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but absolutely certain. Elder Korath, I hope we never have to answer that question. The old historian felt a chill run through his ancient bones. The implication was clear. Humanity did not just have the ability to destroy any potential enemy. They had already identified every possible threat and prepared countermeasures. How many of us would survive if humanity decided we were enemies instead of friends? He asked. All of you would survive, Chun replied immediately. Because we would find another way to solve the problem. We always do, but Korath heard what she did not say. The other way might involve relocating entire populations to new worlds. It might involve restructuring governments or economic systems. It might involve changes so fundamental that the original civilization would cease to exist even though the people survived. Ambassador, he said carefully, how many species in the galaxy have the potential to threaten humanity if they chose to do so? Chun smiled, and for the first time since he had known her, the expression was not entirely kind. None, Elder, not even if they all work together. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Korath realized that he was not just speaking with a diplomat or even a representative of a powerful government. He was speaking with a member of a species so far beyond the rest of the galaxy that they existed in a different category of being entirely. "Then why," he whispered, "why do you let us believe we have any agency at all?" Shun's expression softened again. "Because hope is important, Elder, because dignity matters. Because the alternative to believing you have choices is despair, and despair makes people do terrible things." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Elder Korath, you have learned something today that very few beings in the galaxy will ever know. You understand what humanity really is. What will you do with this knowledge?" Korath thought about the question seriously. "I will do what I have always done. I will serve the Council and work for peace between species. But I will sleep better knowing that if I fail, there are guardians watching over us." "Good," Chun said. "That is exactly what we hoped you would say." After she left, Korath sat alone with his thoughts. He understood now why humanity had hidden their true nature. The galaxy was not ready to know that they lived under the protection of beings who could reshape entire civilizations as easily as moving pieces on a game board, but he also understood something else. Despite their overwhelming power, despite their ability to control or destroy any threat, humanity had chosen to be protectors instead of rulers. They had chosen to guide instead of dominate. It was, Korath realized, perhaps the most profound act of mercy in the history of the galaxy. The strong had chosen to lift up the weak instead of consuming them, and somewhere in the depths of his ancient mind, he offered a prayer of gratitude to whatever forces had shaped humanity into guardians instead of gods. 6 months had passed since the battle at Harmony Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways both visible and hidden. The ruins of the Void Swarm fleet still drifted in empty space, serving as a monument to humanity's hidden power. But the real changes were happening in the minds and hearts of those who knew the truth. The Galactic Council chamber looked the same as always. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their familiar seats, discussing trade agreements and border disputes. But the atmosphere was different now. There was an underlying respect, even reverence, that had not existed before. Ambassador Chun sat in the human section, taking notes and offering suggestions just as she always had. Her polite smile remained unchanged. Her helpful demeanor seemed identical to what it had been for 3 years. But everyone who looked at her now saw something else beneath the surface. Chairman Vexthai called the session to order. "Today we welcome a new member to our council," he announced. "The Kepler Commonwealth has requested admission to our organization." The Kepler Commonwealth was a young civilization that had recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their ships were crude but functional. Their technology was limited but growing. They were exactly the sort of species that the Council loved to guide and protect. The Keplerian ambassador was a tall, thin being with gray skin and large black eyes. She moved nervously as she approached the speaking platform, clearly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the council chamber. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "I am Ambassador Nala of the Kepler Commonwealth. We come seeking friendship and guidance from the great civilizations of the galaxy." Chairman Vexthai nodded approvingly. "Ambassador Nala, the Council welcomes your people. We look forward to helping your civilization grow and prosper in peace." The session continued with the usual formalities. Questions about the Commonwealth's technology, their political structure, their military capabilities. Ambassador Nala answered each question honestly, revealing a species that was hopeful but vulnerable. "Our fleet consists of 47 ships," she explained. "They are sufficient for exploration and light cargo transport, but we recognize they would be inadequate for serious military operations." Admiral Korath leaned forward with interest. "Do you have any experience with hostile forces? Pirates, raiders, territorial disputes with neighboring systems?" Ambassador Nala's expression darkened. "We have encountered the raiders you call the Red Claw Brotherhood. They have attacked 3 of our outer colonies in the past year. We were unable to stop them." Several council members made sympathetic sounds. The Red Claw Brotherhood was a well-known problem. but their hit-and-run tactics made them difficult to track down and eliminate. "The Council can provide protection," Chairman Vextai assured her. "We have patrol ships that monitor the shipping lanes. We can increase their presence in your territory." "That would be most welcome." Ambassador Nala replied with obvious relief. Ambassador Chun had remained quiet throughout the discussion, but now she spoke up. "Ambassador Nala, if I may ask, what are your people's long-term goals? What do you hope to achieve as members of the galactic community?" The Keplerian's large eyes focused on Chun. "We want to learn, Ambassador Chun. We want to grow and become worthy of standing alongside great civilizations like yours." Chun smiled warmly. "That's a noble goal. I'm sure humanity would be happy to help however we can." The session continued for another hour, covering trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. When it finally ended, Ambassador Nala was officially welcomed as the newest member of the Galactic Council. As representatives began filing out of the chamber, Elder Korath approached Ambassador Chun. The ancient historian moved slowly, his centuries of life weighing on his aged body. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "might I have a word?" Chen nodded and followed him to a quiet alcove overlooking the station's central plaza. Through the transparent walls, they could see beings from dozens of species going about their daily business. "What did you think of our new member?" Korath asked. "The Keplerians seem like good people," Chun replied. "Young and hopeful. They remind me of humanity when we first discovered faster-than-light travel." Korath studied her face carefully. "And their problem with the Red Claw Brotherhood?" "Pirates are always a concern for developing civilizations," Chun said neutrally. "Indeed," Korath agreed. "I suppose the Council's patrol ships will need to be more vigilant in that region." Chun's smile remained pleasant. "I'm sure the problem will resolve itself soon." The old historian felt a familiar chill. In the months since learning the truth about humanity, he had become skilled at reading between the lines of Chen's polite responses. The Red Claw Brotherhood had just been marked for elimination, though they would never know what hit them. 2 weeks later, reports began filtering in from the Outer Rim. The Red Claw Brotherhood's main base had been discovered by Council forces and destroyed in a brief but decisive battle. The pirates' entire fleet had been eliminated with no survivors. The official report credited improved intelligence gathering and coordination between Council patrol ships. Nobody mentioned that human vessels had been seen in the area, or that the attack had been carried out with the same surgical precision that had destroyed the Void Swarm. Ambassador Nala sent a message of gratitude to the Council. Her people were safe, and their colonies could develop in peace. She never learned that humanity had quietly removed a threat that could have crippled her civilization's growth. The pattern continued over the following months. New species would join the Council, bringing their problems and challenges. Each time, Chin would listen politely and offer humanity's assistance. Each time, the problems would mysteriously resolve themselves. A territorial dispute between two minor species ended, when both sides suddenly discovered compelling reasons to compromise. A plague threatening an agricultural world was cured by a new medicine that human researchers had coincidentally just developed. A trade war that could have destabilized an entire sector simply evaporated when market conditions unexpectedly shifted. The galaxy grew more peaceful and prosperous. Conflicts became rare, economic growth accelerated. Scientific advancement increased as species shared knowledge more freely. It was a golden age that seemed to have emerged naturally from the wisdom and cooperation of the Council's members. Only a few beings knew the truth. Elder Korath watched it all with a mixture of admiration and unease. Humanity was managing galactic civilization like a gardener tending to a vast greenhouse, pruning problems before they could grow and nurturing developments that served the greater good. One evening, Korath found himself in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the stars. Ambassador Shun entered and joined him at the viewing window. "Beautiful night," she commented. "Indeed," Korath replied, "though I sometimes wonder if the stars themselves are aware of the forces that shape the space between them." Chun glanced at him with amusement. "You're feeling philosophical tonight, Elder." I am thinking about gardeners and gardens, Korath sighed carefully. About the difference between natural growth and careful cultivation. Both have their place, Chun replied. Natural growth can be chaotic and wasteful. Careful cultivation can produce better results with less suffering. But what happens to the garden if the gardener disappears? Chun considered the question seriously. A good gardener teaches the plants to thrive on their own. The goal is not permanent dependence, but eventual independence. Korath nodded slowly. And how long does that process take? Generations, Chun admitted, maybe centuries. Growing up is never fast or easy. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships move through the space lanes around the station. Human vessels were visible among them, their crews maintaining their roles as helpful neighbors and friendly traders. Ambassador, Korath said eventually, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you ever tire of pretending? Of maintaining the deception day after day, year after year? Chun's expression grew thoughtful. Elder, do you think of it as pretending when you speak gently to a frightened child? When you choose simple words to explain complex ideas? When you smile to put someone at ease? No, Korath replied. That is kindness. Exactly, Chun said. We are not pretending to be something we are not. We are choosing to present ourselves in a way that helps others feel safe and comfortable. The kindness is real, even if the full truth remains hidden. But surely some of your people must find this role frustrating. To be capable of such power and yet act as simple merchants and doctors. Chun's smile turned proud. Do you know what? The most common request is from humans wanting to join our galactic service programs? Korath shook his head. They ask to be assigned to medical ships or cultural exchange positions. They want to be teachers and healers and bridge builders. The ones who request military assignments are actually quite rare. Why do you think that is? Because we have learned something that took us a very long time to understand, Chun replied. True strength is not measured by who you can defeat. It is measured by who you can help. A new ship appeared on the edge of sensor range, requesting permission to dock at the station. The communications officer's voice came over the intercom, announcing the arrival of a Keplerian trading vessel. Ambassador Nala's people are adapting quickly to galactic commerce, Korath observed. They are, Chun agreed. In another decade or two, they will be ready for more advanced technologies. In a century, they might be ready to take on some of the responsibilities we currently handle. And then we will step back a little more and let them grow into the role. Just as we have with other species. Korath suddenly understood something he had never considered before. You are not just managing the galaxy, are you? You are preparing it to manage itself. Chun's smile was brilliant. Now you are beginning to see the real plan, Elder. The old historian felt a new kind of awe. Humanity was not content to be eternal guardians, controlling everything from the shadows forever. They were raising an entire galaxy to eventually take care of itself. How long? Korath asked. How long until the galaxy is ready to stand on its own? Honestly? I do not know, Chun admitted. It depends on how quickly species can learn to cooperate without mediation, how well they can resolve conflicts without intervention, how effectively they can identify and neutralize threats before they become crises. Centuries, at least. Probably. But we are patient, and we believe the result will be worth the effort. They were interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Korath, who approached them with his usual military bearing. Since learning the truth about humanity, his attitude toward Chen had changed dramatically. The condescension was gone, replaced by something approaching reverence. Ambassador Chun, he said with a formal bow, I wanted to personally thank you for your assistance with the Red Claw situation. My forces learned much from observing your methods. Any time, Admiral, Chun replied graciously. We are always happy to help our friends. After Korath left, Korath chuckled softly. 6 months ago, he thought humans were too soft to understand real warfare. 6 months ago, we were happy to let him think that, Chun replied. And now? Now he understands that there are different kinds of strength, and that the strongest choice is often the gentlest one. As the evening wore on, more representatives stopped by to speak with Chun. Each had their own way of acknowledging the new reality. Some were direct in their gratitude. Others spoke in careful metaphors. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed. When the observation lounge finally emptied, leaving only Chun and Korath, the old historian had one final question. Ambassador, what happens when a new species arrives that truly threatens the peace? Not pirates or raiders, but a genuine military power that cannot be managed or guided? Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then the galaxy will learn what we look like when we stop being polite, she said simply. And if that day comes? Then we will do what we have always done, Elder. We will protect our friends. Korath nodded, understanding completely. The galaxy lived under the protection of guardians who preferred kindness to conquest, guidance to domination, and patience to force. But beneath the gentle surface lay power that could reshape civilizations or eliminate threats with equal ease. As they prepared to leave, Korath offered one final observation. You know, Ambassador, there is something beautiful about what humanity has chosen to become. What is that? You have the power of gods, but you have chosen to be shepherds. Instead, Chun's smile was warm and genuine. Elder Korath, that may be the finest compliment humanity has ever received. Outside the observation lounge windows, the stars continued their ancient dance. Ships moved through the darkness, carrying goods and people and dreams between distant worlds. The galaxy was peaceful and prosperous, growing stronger each day under the watchful eyes of guardians who had learned that true power came not from what you could destroy, but from what you chose to protect. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their eternal patrol, their crews maintaining the same friendly demeanor that had once fooled an entire galactic civilization. The difference was that now, when Chairman Vextai looked at those ships, he no longer saw harmless merchants. He saw humanity with the gloves off, choosing to be gentle anyway. And that, he realized, was the most terrifying and wonderful thing in the galaxy. The water was gone. Where once the great cities of Zalara Prime had floated beneath crystal blue oceans, now only twisted metal remained. The coral towers that had taken 1,000 years to grow were crushed flat. The singing pools were Zalarian. Children learned to swim were filled with broken machines. Ambassador Kithara pressed her webbed hand against the cold viewing port of her ship. Her skin flickered from deep blue to pale silver. It was the color of fear, the color of death. She had seen this happen to 3 worlds now. 3 beautiful ocean worlds turned into graveyards of metal and rust. The devourers had come without warning. They looked like ships at first, but they were more like a disease. They ate everything. Metal, stone, water, even the air itself. They turned it all into more of themselves. More hungry machines that spread across the galaxy like a plague. Kithara's ship shuddered as it jumped into hyperspace. She was heading to the one place in the galaxy where someone might listen, the Galactic Council on New Geneva. It was her last hope. Her people's last hope. Behind her, she could hear the soft crying of the survivors. Only 50,000 Zalarians were left from a population of 12 billion. They floated in the emergency pools throughout the ship, their gills working hard. In the recycled water, many of them were sick. All of them were afraid. The ship's captain, Veltar, swam up to her in the water-filled corridor. His normally bright green skin was dark with worry. Ambassador, we will arrive at New Geneva in 6 hours. Have you prepared your speech? Kithara touched the small device in her pouch. It contained the final transmission from Zalara Prime. The last desperate message from her homeworld before the Devourers finished their work. She had watched it 100 times, and each time it made her hearts ache. I have the recording, she said, but I fear it will not be enough. The Council has rules, procedures. They like to talk and vote and form committees. We do not have time for that. Veltar's large eyes grew sad. Then what will we do? We will ask for help, Kithara said, and we will hope someone remembers what it means to save a dying people. The council chambers on New Geneva were a marvel of engineering. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their custom environments. The bird-like Altarians perched on high branches in artificial trees. The rock-eating crystalline hegemony delegates sat in pools of molten minerals. The Trade Federation members counted profits on their data tablets. At the center of it all was a massive water sphere where Cathara floated, addressing the galaxy's most powerful beings. Her voice carried through the translation systems in dozens of languages. "Honored members of the Council," she began. "I come before you with a simple request. My people are dying. The machines called Devourers have taken our worlds. They have killed billions of innocent beings. We ask for your help." She activated the recording device. Suddenly, the chamber filled with the sounds and images of Zalara Prime's final moments. The great underwater cities collapsing. Families trapped as the machines drained their oceans. Children crying for their parents in the darkness. The recording showed the Devourer ships as they truly were. Not sleek vessels of war, but terrible amalgamations of consumed matter. Each ship was built from the bones of dead worlds. They moved like a swarm of insects, but each insect was the size of a mountain. When the recording ended, the chamber was silent. Then Elder Vax of the crystalline hegemony spoke. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "This is indeed tragic," he said, "but what you ask is impossible. The Devourers have consumed entire star systems. Civilizations with fleets 1,000 times larger than ours have fallen to them. We cannot risk our own people on a hopeless mission." Counselor Zeph of the Altarian Empire ruffled his golden feathers. "Perhaps we could offer sanctuary to the survivors. The Altarian systems have some suitable water worlds. Small ones, of course. We cannot house 12 billion refugees, but for 50,000. "The Trade Federation suggests a more practical approach," interrupted Merchant Prince Golvar. "Zalarian deep-sea mining technology is valuable. We could purchase the rights to their remaining knowledge, use the profits to fund refugee camps." Cathara felt her hope drain away like water through a broken seal. They were not going to help. They were going to manage the crisis. They were going to turn her people's extinction into a bureaucratic problem. "You do not understand," she said, her skin flashing bright red with anger. "The Devourers will not stop with Zalarian space. They consume everything in their path. Today, it is us. Tomorrow it will be you, all of you." The council members looked uncomfortable. They shifted in their seats and avoided her eyes. They knew she was right, but they also knew they were not strong enough to fight the machines. Elder Vax called for a vote. "All in favor of establishing monitoring stations to observe the Devourer advance." 38 hands, claws, and tentacles rose. "All in favor of offering limited refugee assistance to Zalarian survivors." 41 appendages lifted. "All in favor of military intervention against the Devourer swarm." Silence. Not a single vote. Cathara closed her eyes. Her people were alone. The galaxy would watch them die from a safe distance. They would monitor and observe and offer thoughts and prayers, but they would not fight. Then a voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was a voice Cathara had never heard before, clear and strong and completely unafraid. "The Zilarian people ask for help. We'll provide it." Every head in the chamber turned. In the human delegation section, a woman in a blue uniform was standing. She was small compared to most of the alien representatives, but something about her presence filled the room. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Diplomatic Corps stepped forward. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her dark eyes were steady and calm. The blue marble insignia of Earth gleamed on her collar. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates laughed. Others chittered with concern. The Altarian squawked in surprise. "Captain Rodriguez," Elder Vax said, his rocky voice grinding with annoyance. "Humanity has been part of this council for less than 2 centuries. You lack the experience to understand the situation. The Devourers have destroyed civilizations that existed when your species was still discovering fire." Rodriguez did not sit down. She did not look away from the Elder's glowing crystal eyes. "With respect, Elder Vax, experience is not the same as wisdom. My species may be young, but we know the difference between right and wrong. The Zalarians asked for help, not monitoring. Not refugee camps, not thoughts and prayers. Help. Counselor. Zeph ruffled his feathers nervously. Captain, your courage is admirable, but be realistic. Humanity has fewer than 50 worlds. Your entire fleet could not scratch the hull of a single devourer ship. You would be sending your people to die. For nothing. Rodriguez smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. Counselor Zeph, you are operating under some incorrect assumptions about human capabilities. But that is understandable. We have been very careful about what information we share with the galactic community. She touched a small device on her wrist. A holographic display appeared in the air above her head. It showed what looked like a star chart, but the symbols were unlike anything the aliens had seen before. I am requesting permission from Earth Command to deploy assets that have been held in reserve, assets that most of you believed were fictional. Merchant Prince. Golvar leaned forward. What assets? Human fiction is full of impossible technologies. Faster-than-light drives that ignore physics. Weapons that destroy planets, ships that travel through time. You cannot be serious, Rodriguez kept smiling. The beautiful thing about human fiction, Merchant Prince, is that we never really considered it fiction. We considered it instruction. Manuals. She pressed another button on her device. A transmission began broadcasting across all known frequencies. It was a simple message, but it made the quantum computers of a dozen species crash trying to analyze it. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez, authorization code Omega-77. Request immediate deployment of Legacy Fleet assets to Zalarian space. All units respond, all legends report for duty. The transmission ended. The chamber was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Elder Vax's crystals glowed brighter. Captain, what have you done? Rodriguez finally sat down. She folded her hands in her lap like someone who had just ordered coffee, not a military intervention. Against impossible odds? I've done what humans do, Elder Vax. When someone asks for help, we help them. The how is just details. Cathara stared at the human woman. She had seen desperation before. She had seen fear and anger and hopelessness. But she had never seen what she saw in Captain Rodriguez's eyes. Complete, unshakable confidence. How long? Cathara asked quietly. Rodriguez checked her chronometer. The first units should reach Zalarian space in 72 hours. Full deployment within a week. How many ships? Veltar asked from the water beside Cathara. Rodriguez tilted her head thoughtfully. That depends on how you define ships. Some of our assets operate outside traditional physics. Others exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A few are technically impossible but work anyway. The Trade Federation representative's data tablet started smoking. That makes no sense. You cannot deploy impossible ships crewed by fictional characters. Rodriguez stood up again. This time her smile was warm and genuine. Merchant Prince, you are about to learn something important about humanity. We don't really believe in impossible. We believe in unlikely, improbable, and inadvisable. But not impossible? She walked toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and Ambassador Cathara? Your people might want to start preparing evacuation protocols for your remaining worlds. Not because we're going to fail, but because what's about to happen is going to be very loud and very bright. We want to make sure all the civilians are safely out of the way when the legends arrive. The chamber doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the questions began. What did she mean by legends? How can humans deploy fictional assets? Should we be concerned about this Omega protocol? Cathara was not listening to the debates. She was thinking about the look in Captain Rodriguez's eyes, a complete absence of doubt. Either the humans were completely insane, or they were about to do something that would change the galaxy forever. Either way, for the first time in months, Cathara felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope.in. The deep spaces between stars, ancient communication arrays came to life. Signals pulsed across impossible distances, reaching hidden bases and secret facilities that officially did not exist. On Jupiter's moon, Europa, ice cracked as something massive began to rise from the frozen depths. Near Saturn's rings, space itself seemed to ripple as invisible shapes revealed themselves, and on Earth, in a command center buried beneath the deepest ocean trenches, Fleet Admiral Chun stared at a tactical display that showed ship positions scattered across human space. Ships with names that made historians weep and quantum physicists question the nature of reality itself. She pressed a single button. Across the galaxy, legends began to wake up. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every major news network was broadcasting the same impossible story. Humanity had promised to fight the Devourers. The species that had barely learned to build starships was going to face a threat that had consumed entire civilizations on the trade world of Kepler Station. Alien merchants gathered around holographic displays, watching human stock prices crash. Betting pools opened on how long the human fleet would last. The optimistic odds were 17 minutes. The pessimistic ones were 30 seconds. In the crystal cities of the hegemony homeworld, Eldervax called an emergency session. The massive, crystalline beings resonated with worry, their harmonic voices creating a sound like breaking glass. They had seen what happened to species that challenged the Devourers. They did not want to watch another civilization die, but nowhere was the reaction stronger than in the chambers of the Galactic Council itself. The delegates who had remained after the session clustered in small groups, their voices mixing into a symphony of concern and disbelief. Counselor Zeph preened his golden feathers nervously. "This is madness. We should stop them. Send a formal protest to Earth. They are going to get themselves killed. And when they do, the Devourers will turn their attention to the rest of us." Merchant Prince Golvar was calculating something on his data tablet. The economic impact will be severe. Human trade routes carry 30% of the galaxy's medical supplies. If they disappear, we will have shortages across 40 systems. Ambassador. Cathara floated in her water sphere, listening to their concerns. She understood their fear, but she also remembered the look in Captain Rodriguez's eyes, complete confidence. Not the desperate bravado of someone making a hopeless gesture, but the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "we should wait and see what the humans actually send before we assume they are committing suicide." Elder Vax's crystals flashed red. "Ambassador, with respect, your people are dying. It is natural for you to grasp at any hope, even false hope, but mathematics does not lie. The Devourers have consumed civilizations with 1,000,000 ships. Humanity has fewer than 50 worlds. The outcome is certain." Cathara's skin flickered from blue to green to silver. It was a pattern her people used when they were thinking hard about something important. "Elder Vax, may I ask you a question about mathematics?" "Of course." "If someone told you that 2 + 2 = 5, what would you say?" The elders' crystals dimmed with confusion. "I would say they are wrong. Mathematics is absolute. But what if they could prove it? What if they showed you 2 objects, added 2 more objects, and somehow you counted 5 objects total? What would that mean?" "It would mean either I was counting wrong, or the objects themselves were not what they appeared to be." Cathara's skin settled into a steady gold color. "The color of hope, exactly. The humans just promised to deploy ships that should not exist, crewed by people who should be fictional. Perhaps our mathematics are about to be proven wrong." Meanwhile, on Earth, Fleet Admiral Chen stood in her command center 3 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean. The room was carved from solid rock and lined with metal that did not appear on any periodic table. Displays showed ship positions. That made no sense according to standard navigation principles. Some coordinates were listed as negative numbers. Others included letters. A few were simply marked as yes. Her aide, Commander Park, approached with a worried expression. "Admiral, we're receiving thousands of communications from across the galaxy. Everyone wants to know what we're actually sending to help the Zolarians." Chun did not take her eyes off the displays. What did Captain Rodriguez tell them? That we don't believe in impossible, Chun smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had spent 30 years keeping humanity's greatest secret. She always was good with understatement. She pressed a series of buttons on her command console. Around the galaxy, ancient communication arrays hummed to life. These were not the quantum communicators used for normal interstellar messages. These were something older, something that worked on principles the physicists still did not understand. The first response came from Europa Base, a mechanical voice, crisp and professional, USS Enterprise responding. Captain Kirk acknowledging deployment orders. Estimate arrival at Veller in space in 71 hours, 37 minutes. Commander Park's tablet clattered to the floor. Admiral, that's impossible. Captain Kirk is a fictional character from old television shows. The Enterprise is not a real ship. Chun finally turned away from her displays. Her face was calm, but her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Commander, how long have you been assigned to Deep Command? 6 months, ma'am. Then there are things you have not yet been cleared to know. Tell me, what do you think fiction is? Park bent to retrieve his tablet. His hands were shaking slightly. Stories, ma'am. Made-up adventures, entertainment. Wrong. Chen walked to a viewport that looked out into the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. Strange lights moved in that darkness. Lights that belonged to things that officially did not exist. Fiction is not made-up stories, Commander. Fiction is practice. It is training. It is preparation for the day when the galaxy needs heroes who can do impossible things. Another voice crackled over the communication system. This one was different. Smoother, more confident. Millennium Falcon checking in. Han Solo here, ready to do the impossible, as usual. Park's tablet slipped from his hands again. Admiral, Han Solo is from movies. The Millennium Falcon is a fictional spaceship. Chun's reflection in the viewport was smiling. Is it, Commander? Are you certain about that? Before Park could answer, more voices began reporting in. Each one made his understanding of reality crumble a little more. Normandy SR-2 standing by. Commander Shepard ready for deployment. Serenity acknowledging orders. Captain Reynolds reporting, we aim to misbehave. USS Voyager ready for departure. Captain Janeway here. We've been lost in worse places than this. Chun turned back to her displays. The impossible coordinates were changing, ship positions moving. As vessels that should not exist began their journey toward a war that could not be won. Commander Park, I want you to understand something very important. Every civilization in this galaxy has stories. Tales of heroes and villains, of impossible ships and miraculous victories. But only humanity has ever asked the next logical question. Which is? What if our stories were real? What if our heroes could actually exist? What if the ships in our imagination could actually fly? Park was staring at the displays now, watching coordinates that included dimensions his training had never covered. You're saying we somehow made fiction real? I'm saying we never considered it fiction in the first place. Chun pressed another button. A new display appeared, showing Earth itself. But this was not the Earth that appeared on any public star chart. This Earth was surrounded by construction facilities that existed in folded space. Shipyards that built vessels from crystallized dreams, academies where heroes learned to become real. For over 200 years, Commander, humanity has been preparing for the day when the galaxy would need us to be more than we appear to be. We studied every story ever told. We analyzed every hero ever imagined. We asked ourselves, how do you build a ship that can do the impossible? How do you train a crew that can save everyone? The communication system crackled again. This time, the voice was different, older, more serious. This is Admiral Adama aboard Battlestar Galactica, all Vipers ready for launch. We fought impossible odds before. Park's legs gave out. He sat heavily in the nearest chair. This is insane. You're telling me that every fictional character I grew up watching actually exists? Not exactly. Chun pulled up another display. This one showed personnel files with pictures that looked exactly like actors from old movies and television shows. But the files were marked with current dates. Real service records, actual medical exams. We didn't resurrect fictional characters, Commander. We found people who could become them. People who had the same courage, the same skills, the same unshakable determination to protect others. She pointed to one file. A man with sharp features and intelligent eyes. James Kirk was a farm boy from Iowa who tested off the charts for leadership and tactical thinking. We gave him the training to become the captain his fictional counterpart always was. Another file. A woman with red hair and determined eyes. Commander Shepard was a soldier who scored perfect marks in every combat simulation we threw at her. We taught her to be the hero the galaxy needs. Park scrolled through the files. Each one showed real people with real backgrounds who happened to look exactly like characters from human entertainment. How is this possible? Careful genetic selection, advanced psychological profiling, and something our scientists call narrative resonance. Jun's smile grew wider. It turns out that when enough people believe in a story strongly enough, reality starts to bend toward making that story true. The communication system was alive now with dozens of voices checking in. Ship names that belonged in museums were REPORT-ING ready for battle. Captains who should have been fictional were acknowledging orders. But then a new voice cut through the chatter. This one was cold, mechanical, absolutely without emotion. This is Admiral Chun, all Legacy Fleet units. This is a Code Omega deployment. Full authorization granted. You are weapons-free for all necessary actions to protect Zalarian space. Park looked confused. Admiral, that was your voice. But you're standing right here. Chun pressed one more button. The display changed to show a ship that made Park's brain hurt to look at. It was simultaneously a sleek exploration vessel, a massive military cruiser, and something that existed in too many dimensions for human eyes to process properly. That was my counterpart aboard the UES Possibility. The flagship of the Legacy Fleet. Every ship needs an admiral, even ships that technically should not exist. On the display, the Possibility was beginning to move. But it was not moving through normal space. It was moving through narrative space, following storylines that connected fictional reality to actual reality. Park tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Admiral, how many ships are in this Legacy Fleet? Chun considered the question. That depends on how you count. If you count only the ships that exist in normal space-time, about 50. If you count the ships that exist in parallel dimensions, several hundred. If you count the ships that exist in potential space where stories become real. She paused. Let's just say the Devourers are about to learn why humanity has always been careful about which stories we choose to tell. The communication system crackled one final time. This voice was different from all the others. It carried an authority that seemed to echo across dimensions. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701D. Legacy Fleet is departing for Zalarian space. Estimated arrival, 68 hours. To any Devourers monitoring this frequency, I have only one thing to say. The voice paused. Make it so. Admiral Chen turned to Commander Park, who was staring at the displays with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just been rewritten. Commander, you asked if this was insane? The answer is yes. Completely, absolutely. Insane, but sometimes insanity is exactly what the situation requires. On the displays, impossible ships were moving toward an impossible battle to save a people who had asked for help. And somewhere in the depths of space, ancient machines that had consumed 1,000 civilizations were about to learn something new about the power of stories, the strength of heroes, and the determination of a species that had never learned the difference between fiction and possibility. Park managed to find his voice. What happens if we lose? Chun's reflection in the viewport showed a woman who had spent decades preparing for this moment. Commander, we're sending the greatest heroes humanity has ever imagined to fight a battle. That cannot be won using weapons that should not exist aboard ships that ignore the laws of physics. If we lose, it won't be because we didn't try hard enough. She walked toward the exit, then paused. Besides, these aren't just our stories anymore. They're the galaxy's stories. And sometimes, when everyone needs a miracle, stories have a way of making themselves true. The command center fell silent except for the hum of impossible machinery and the whisper of dreams becoming real. Outside, in the crushing darkness of Earth's deepest ocean, lights moved that belonged to ships getting ready to save the galaxy. Ships with names that made children dream and adults remember what it meant to believe in heroes. The legacy fleet was coming, and the universe was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their military might, it had always been their stories. The devourer swarm consumed Zilara Fourth like a disease eating healthy flesh. What had once been a world of floating gardens and crystal cities beneath gentle seas was now nothing but twisted metal and grinding machinery. The organic curves of Zilarian architecture were replaced by the harsh angles of mechanical construction. The singing pools where children learned to swim were now processing centers, where stolen matter was converted into more machines. Cathara watched the destruction from her command ship at the edge of the system. Each pulse of light from the surface meant another 1,000 of her people were dead. Another piece of her civilization was gone forever. She had hoped the humans would arrive in time to save something, but the fourth world was already lost. "Ambassador," Captain Valtar swam up beside her in the water-filled observation chamber. "Our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the jump point. Whatever the humans are sending, it's big." Cathara's skin flickered. From despair blue to hope gold, how big? Unknown. Our instruments keep giving impossible readings. Some ships register as larger than space stations. Others appear to be smaller than shuttlecraft, but generate energy signatures like battle cruisers. A few ... He paused, his gills fluttering with confusion. A few appear to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. On the tactical display, red dots marked devourer positions throughout the system. There were thousands of them, each one a ship built from the consumed remains of dead worlds. They moved in perfect coordination, like cells in a vast organism dedicated to consumption and growth. Then the first human ship appeared, the USS Enterprise dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of light that made every sensor in the system scream warnings. She was beautiful in a way that made Cathara's hearts ache. Clean lines and graceful curves, gleaming hull plates that seemed to bend light around them. She was exactly as she appeared in the old human broadcasts, but somehow more real than reality itself. "By the depths," Valtar whispered. "She's magnificent." More ships followed. The Millennium Falcon materialized in a burst of impossible physics, already moving at speeds that should have torn her apart. The Normandy phased into normal space like a ghost becoming solid. The USS Voyager emerged trailing energy signatures. That looked like captured starlight, but it was not just the ships that defied understanding, it was how they moved. The Enterprise executed a banking turn that ignored the laws of momentum. The Millennium Falcon threaded through an asteroid field at sublight speeds while somehow arriving ahead of ships that had entered the field first. The Serenity appeared to be in 3 different locations at once before settling into a single position that satisfied the observer's need for logical consistency. On the bridge of her ship, Cathara activated the communication system. She needed to coordinate with the human fleet, to share intelligence about devourer tactics and positions. But when she opened the channel, what she heard made her skin cycle through every color in the Zilarian emotional spectrum. "This is Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Enterprise. All human vessels implement attack pattern Enterprise. Science officer, I need a full tactical analysis of these machines. Are they truly artificial, or is there biological components we're missing?" Another voice responded, calm and professional. "This is Commander Shepard aboard the Normandy. My A is analyzing their communication patterns. These machines are more sophisticated than anything in our databases. They're not just destroying, they're learning." A third voice, rough and confident. "Han Solo here. I don't care how sophisticated they are. They're threatening innocent people, and that's all I need to know. Chewie, charge the main guns. Cathara realized she was listening to legends made real. These were not actors playing roles or computer simulations running programs. These were actual people with the skills and personalities of humanity's greatest fictional heroes, commanding ships that somehow existed despite violating every known law of physics. The Enterprise moved toward the largest concentration of Devourer ships. Her phasers lanced out, not with the simple energy beams Cathara expected, but with streams of coherent force that seemed to edit reality as they passed. Where the beams struck Devourer hulls, the machines did not just explode. They ceased. They became spaces where machines had never existed. Fascinating, came another voice over the communication channel. The Devourer's construction appears to be based on quantum probability matrices. They exist as the statistical likelihood of consumed matter being organized into functional machinery. If we can disrupt that probability— Spock, Kirk's voice interrupted. Can you target their quantum foundations? Attempting now, Captain. The Enterprise's torpedoes were unlike anything in any military database. They moved through space like guided thoughts, each one carrying a payload of crystallized impossibility. When they struck Devourer ships, the machines did not just die. They forgot how to exist, but the Devourers were not helpless victims. They had consumed entire civilizations, absorbed technologies from 1,000 different species. They began adapting to the human attack patterns with terrifying speed. A swarm of smaller Devourer units surrounded the Millennium Falcon, firing weapons that could disassemble matter at the atomic level. Any normal ship would have been reduced to component particles in seconds. Instead, Han Solo laughed. You picked the wrong ship, bucketheads. Punch it, Chewie. The Falcon moved in ways that made Cathara's brain hurt. She seemed to slip between the Devourer weapons, not by dodging them, but by convincing space itself that she was somewhere else. Her guns returned fire with impossible accuracy, each shot finding the exact weak point needed to cripple a machine that had no apparent weak points. The battle expanded as more human ships arrived. The USS Voyager appeared from nowhere, her captain's voice crisp and determined. This is Captain Janeway. We've faced impossible odds before. These machines may be ancient, but they've never encountered human stubbornness. Voyager's weapons were different from the Enterprise's. Where Kirk's ship edited reality, Janeway's vessel negotiated with it. Her photon torpedoes convinced Devourer shields that they were not actually solid. Her phasers explained to enemy armor that it would be much happier as scattered atoms. The Serenity moved through the battle like a dancer, her crew somehow rescuing Zellarian survivors from the surface of the dying world even while massive ship-to-ship combat raged around them. Captain Reynolds' voice was calm and conversational, as if he were discussing the weather rather than performing impossible rescue operations. This is Serenity. We've got civilians trapped in the underwater city ruins. Going in for pickup. If anyone wants to keep the big metal nasties off our back, that'd be shiny. The Enterprise immediately adjusted position, placing herself between Serenity and a squadron of Devourer interceptors. Kirk's tactical genius was evident in every maneuver. He was not just fighting a battle, he was conducting a symphony of controlled chaos that turned enemy advantages into disadvantages, but the Devourers were learning. They began coordinating their attacks, focusing fire on single human ships. The Normandy took a hit that should have vaporized her, but somehow Commander Shepard kept her flying. Shields down to 12%, came the report. Hull breaches. On decks 4 through 7. Joker, I need everything you've got. You got it, Commander. This ship's been through worse. The Normandy spun away from her attackers, firing a spread of missiles that somehow convinced space itself to fold, allowing the weapons to strike targets from impossible angles. But more Devourer ships were arriving, pouring into the system like metallic locusts. Then something changed. A new ship appeared at the edge of the battle. This one was different from all the others, larger, more complex. She moved with the grace of a predator and the authority of a flagship. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard aboard. The USS Enterprise NCC-1701D, all ships, this is now a coordinated fleet action. Commander data, analysis of enemy weak points. The android's voice was precise and emotionless. Captain, the Devourers appear to be controlled by a central coordination matrix. If we can locate and disrupt their command structure, the entire swarm will become vulnerable. But even as the human fleet fought with impossible skill and weapons that defied physics, the Devourers kept coming. For every machine destroyed, 2 more emerged from the processing centers on the dying world below. The humans were magnificent, but they were still outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Cathara watched the battle with growing despair. The humans were performing miracles, but miracles had limits. Even legends could be overwhelmed by pure numbers. Then she heard something that changed everything. A new voice on the communication channel. This one was different from all the others, younger, more uncertain, but carrying a power that made reality itself listen. This is Luke Skywalker in X-Wing Red 5. I'm reading a massive artificial construct. At the center of the swarm, it looks like ... He paused. It looks like a Death Star, but bigger, much bigger. Silence fell over the communication channel. Even the sound of weapons fire seemed to fade for a moment. Captain Kirk's voice was the first to respond. Luke, are you certain? Yes, sir. It's not broadcasting any signals, but I can feel it through the Force. That's their command center. That's what's controlling the entire swarm. Picard's voice was thoughtful. A central command structure would explain their coordination. If we could disable it. The question, came a new voice, cold and mechanical, is whether such a structure can be disabled by conventional weapons. My analysis suggests it would require a very precise attack. Cathara realized she was listening to tactical planning. Between legends, but these were not just any legends. These were heroes who had faced impossible odds before and found ways to win. Heroes who specialized in turning certain defeat into miraculous victory. Han Solo's voice cut through the analysis. Kid, you thinking what I think you're thinking? Luke's reply was quiet but determined. Sometimes you have to trust the Force, Han. Sometimes you have to believe that impossible things are possible. That's what I was afraid you'd say. The human fleet began to reposition itself. The Enterprise and Enterprise D moved to create a corridor through the Devourer swarm. The Millennium Falcon and Serenity began harassing operations to draw enemy fire. The Normandy and Voyager provided covering fire with weapons that convinced enemy sensors that targets were somewhere other than where they actually were, and through it all, one small fighter moved toward the heart of the swarm. A single X-Wing against a structure that dwarfed planets. Luke Skywalker, the last of the Jedi, flying toward a target that could not be destroyed by any logical means. Cathara watched the tactical display with her heart's pounding. She had never believed in mystical forces or impossible powers. But she was watching a young human pilot do something that should have been suicide. Flying with a precision that seemed to bend the laws of physics around his ship, the Death Star began firing at the X-Wing. Beams of energy that could shatter moons reached out like fingers of destruction. But Luke's ship danced between them, following flight patterns that existed more in faith than in aerodynamics. I'm going in, Luke's voice said quietly. Cover me, the human fleet responded instantly. Every ship moved to provide protection for the single fighter. The Enterprise's phasers carved paths through enemy formations. The Millennium Falcon pulled impossible maneuvers to draw fire away from Luke's approach. The Normandy's missiles convinced space itself to provide cover, and Luke Skywalker, farm boy turned legend, lined up his impossible shot and trusted in. A power that most of the galaxy had forgotten was real. When he fired, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The torpedo moved not just through space, but through possibility itself, following a path that led from what was to what needed to be. The Death Star died not with an explosion, but with a sigh of relief, as if it had been waiting for someone to set it free from the burden of destruction. And across the system, every Devourer ship stopped moving, stopped firing, stopped consuming. They floated in space like sleeping giants, their red lights fading to peaceful darkness. The battle was over. The legends had won. and Cathara realized she was crying tears that sparkled like stars in the artificial gravity of her ship. The silence that followed the Death Star's destruction was the most beautiful sound Cathara had ever heard. For the first time in months, space around a Zalarian world was quiet. No grinding of metal consuming metal, no screams of dying cities, just the peaceful hum of ships floating in the darkness, their weapons finally silent. But the quiet did not last long. All ships, this is Captain Picard. Sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. It appears we have destroyed a control node, not the primary command structure. On the tactical displays, new red dots began appearing at the edge of the system, hundreds of them. Then thousands. The Devourer swarm Luke had stopped was just the advance force. The real fleet was coming, and it was larger than anything anyone had imagined. Captain Kirk's voice was calm but serious. "How many ships are we looking at, Data?" The android's response made every heart in the fleet skip a beat. "Preliminary